Can you kill the lights?
All right, you're joining us for another episode of Kill the Lights, the podcast that deals with everything horror, dark, and all the stuff that's on the fringes. This is Joey D, and with me is my co-host Carl De Mesa. It's been a while since we recorded this. We recorded an episode of Kill the Lights, and now we're all under quarantine, so you got no choice, but you're going to be listening to our voices for the next 20 minutes. Anyway, today's episode, we are talking about the movie Tremors. I'm pretty sure a lot of you remember this movie, not just because it was super famous, but I remember there was a time in local Philippine television, they were just showing this movie all the time. So it was released originally in 1990 and directed by Ron Underwood, and as I conveniently like to call it, that one horror movie with Kevin Bacon of Footloose fame. The main stars are Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. Their characters Val and Earl, respectively. Basically, it's stupidly simple. We were talking about the main gist behind this entire movie. Earth-digging, worm-like monsters devouring people in the mountains. The movie takes place in a small desert town. It's a mining town. And how the residents of this small mining town survive or don't survive these creatures. Basically, these creatures, they're practically blind because they're underground. They can't see above ground. And the thing that makes them tick are vibrations. I'd go a little easy on classifying this as a horror movie because, again, it's more of a suspense. To me, it's more of a suspense, sometimes comedic kind of movie. The only thing that makes it horror is that, these creatures are absolutely terrifying. Fortunately enough, there's been some sort of resurfacing of this movie, especially now that we're all on lockdown. It's one of those movies you want to revisit. A little too good to be called a B movie, but a little not too serious to be called a serious movie. So, I assume you've seen this, Carl, many times.
Not serious at all. And yes, it's one of those guilty pleasure movies, man.
Yeah, so again, very simple movie. It starts off in a mining town in Nevada. And you have various characters in the movie. You have the young, eager to please young gun, eager to impress the older guard. You have a resident Asian guy who owns the store. You have a resident good-looking girl, a couple who is totally gun crazy. And you have kids. You have the whole cast. The complete host of characters in this movie. What did you find? Do you remember that time when you first were aware that there was a movie Tremors? What prompted you to watch it?
I watched it because it was mostly Ron Underwood's paean or homage to those 1950s creature feature movies like Them, Tarantulite, Came from Outer Space. There's a lot of that kind of vibe, the low budget. The very indie kind, but it's really put out by a major studio. The sign that it's high quality is that it's got a B plus cast. And as you said, it's that horror movie with Kevin Bacon in it. And he really, actually, he's the one who makes it work, man. There's a couple of things that are really genre specific about it, like the cast, like you said about the Chinese person. There's like, how does a Chinese guy end up in a mining redneck town? It's like a smorgasbord cast of redneck characters. The most interesting thing is that Reba McEntire is in this.
Yep.
As a gun crazy wife.
Yeah, the crazy wife of the equally crazy survivalist. I guess that's what you call them.
They're called preppers, but they would prefer survivalist.
Yeah, that's what you call them. I guess as a young kid who didn't know much about films, the only thing I knew much about films is either I liked them or I didn't.
Mm-hmm. And, what did you like about this one, bro?
I guess it's just how the characters, found themselves not exactly teaming together, but helping each other out. Like we were talking about the Asian guy. His name was Walter Chang. He basically owned the store. Of the
only store in town.
store in town, and it's the dynamic, the relationship they had before the creature started showing up, and how they ultimately like banded together and started to help each other out from the rooftops of their houses and the buildings, because again, these creatures were triggered by any minute or big kind of vibration. So it was hard for them to actually, they were basically stranded on the roof decks, so it was really hard for them to figure a way out of the town to safety. So that's what really, I guess, in my limited knowledge, it's at the time it seemed like a very original kind of problem. I mean, they had
creatures for one, right?
the creatures had electricity, they had guns, but the thing is they couldn't get on the ground. They had cars, the only problem was how do they make it to their cars. And these creatures were unbelievably strong. They were tearing apart like pickup trucks and whatever. So it was such a the creativity on escaping these creatures was really, really impressive for me.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have been so interesting if they were just inventive, but the character chemistry between those guys, like, of course, these people lived there because they didn't want to be disturbed much by other people, right? The preppers and those two, it's essentially a buddy movie between Val and Earl. And they were there because they were, like lazy, do nothings, right? They were there because there was no other opportunities and they liked lazing about. I can assure you that the Graboids were definitely inspired by David Lynch's Dune and the sandworms in there. It's just, it seems like one of those monster concepts that got thrown around in the studio. And all the executives got drunk one night and somebody said, "Hey, I really like Dune and the sandworms. Why don't we make a movie out of that and put comedy in it?" Like, it just worked for some reason. Of course, Ron Underwood was like, "Yeah, I really would like to also make a homage out of the 1950s horror movies." Wow. Kevin Bacon with a thunk.
Yeah, that sort of spelled the difference, I guess, in a nutshell, is the reason why it was attractive and the reason why I took it seriously is because the movie itself didn't take itself too seriously.
It's totally fun. Yeah.
It's easy to put together a movie where there are scientists discovering this monster and epic proportion. Like, it's a disaster that concerns the entire world. This movie kept it simple. The solution was basically just get out of the town, and it wasn't a worldwide disaster. It wasn't a pandemic. It wasn't like zombies everywhere. It was just concerning a small town. And again, as a viewer, you'd think it would be simple enough to move away from that town and escape these creatures. But again, it was very realistic. I mean, the comedy element basically was between Val and Earl and the other characters thinking that I think all of them were thinking that the other guy or the other girl was basically an idiot.
I know better than this guy, obviously.
Yeah, which is basically the human nature. When put in a disaster, one guy or one woman thinks he or she knows better than the other. So that's where the comedy mostly came from. That the human factor. We weren't looking at people with extraordinary strength, or we weren't seeing people with enormous heroic potential. These guys were regular human beings just trying to survive, like the threat that was the creature. And again, the creature, it was no joke at all. Like, we're talking about massive worms under the ground, and then within their mouths there were additional tentacles that would grab you and pull you into the creature's gaping mouth. It's so simple. The simplicity really attracted me to this movie. And of course, part of this movie is part of the charm of movies like this is you're always waiting who's next to go. You're always waiting who the next person to buy it is.
Yeah.
So I think the pace and the timing between each victim or each kill, as we referred to it, I think it was perfect. There was never a dull moment, but it also managed to show that it did take them a while to come to their senses and develop a plan. Because again, these people weren't smart people or experts. This was regular people.
One of the funniest moments, I think, if you remember, was the preppers, the survivalist couple, just shooting at this one, all the graboids that were coming into their house, and like the ridiculous amount of guns in that bunker was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I loved that. That was one of my favorite scenes where they made it to the bunker, and there were again the firepower in that bunker,
Yeah,
and
like
elephant
gun.
Yeah, the elephant gun, and escaping from the bunker. They took more than what they needed. They had like C4. They had
C4 and dynamite. And like, wow.
Yeah, and talking about
next man.
One of my memorable scenes was early on in the film when Kevin Bacon, the three main characters, the seismologist, what was her name?
The university student, Mindy Sterling.
Yeah, the character's name was Rhonda. One of the most memorable things was when Val, Earl, and Rhonda, they were stranded on top of those rocks. So basically, they had to pole vault their way to the car, and it's just stuff like that, little details like that. That hey, you know what? That totally made sense, and you know what? Any stupid idiot could figure that out. And it did take them some time. They basically had to spend overnight on the rocks. It took them. It wasn't like a total cop out where, by some miracle that they were able to think about it. It shows that these guys really had to go through a lot. It wasn't just for the sake of a quicker pace that somehow brain suddenly grew on the character of Kevin Bacon or other guys and girls, diba?
Like the script is surprisingly tight, and it surprises you in terms of how they can solve the problem of avoiding these graboids. Like, you remember Rhonda suddenly hit on the idea to get really long pipes and then pole vault it over to a couple of rocks until they reached their truck.
Yeah.
That was a great moment. I find it also unusual that the special effects were actually very believable. Like, on paper, it's just big worms, but when the characters are confronted by these graboids, they're surprisingly scary. Like, I don't want to get eaten by that thing. Like, that's definitely a monster, and it's unusual for that kind of B movie to have those kinds of that amount of budget for special effects.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like super impressive.
You can see the how it could have been improved, but wow, it's definitely a B movie budget. Huh?
It wasn't Friday the 13th impressive, but like the fake blood, you could tell it was fake blood, whatnot. But again, what the point is, it also wasn't totally not given thought. You knew it was fake, but it wasn't a horrible version of fake. It was just the right amount. Like the creatures did move realistically. Honestly, the only time when I really just realized that, oh yeah, the special effects are horrible, was the final scene when saw the creature in its entirety. I was like, oh yeah, that looks fake. But for the entire movie, again, the good job is, again, they were underground. You weren't supposed to see the entire thing. That made it even scarier. So yeah, good job with that. I guess that's a good point. The creatures were terrifying and what they were capable of doing. So they didn't always enjoy that much screen time, but the few times they'd show like the jaws or the mouth or the tentacles, it was really scary. Mission was accomplished when that
Which
happened.
is all the more disappointing that the sequels tried to add on weird creatures that were walking and not worms. Like in Tremors 2, that was the big thing that disappointed me.
Yeah, I actually couldn't believe it. I only realized like
why does it have legs?
And I realized there's even a Tremors 3. I honestly thought it all stopped with the sequel, but yeah, if you ask me, stick with the original movie. As with most movies, stick to the original. I mean, there are movies that get better. Like I mentioned a while ago, Friday the 13th just got better and better, especially when it was time for Friday the 13th Part 4, Part 5.
Yeah.
But with Tremors, I think if you haven't watched it or you were to revisit it, of course, definitely revisit
Go with the first one. I think they were trying to capture the magic of that kind of buddy movie, that funny, adventurous vibe that they didn't quite really just get it. Like the executives weren't drunk enough the second and the third time around, or they weren't doing as much drugs as the first one.
Yeah, I it's just basically knowing when to stop because again, you see a lot of movies like this. You get lucky. I'm sure they didn't think it would be as big when they released the first one, but then they got lucky. But then, part of the game is knowing when to stop, and I think they just tried to.
Yeah.
I think they enjoyed when they reaped the benefits of the first one, and I guess I don't know. Maybe they got greedy, or
That's true.
they just really didn't know. There are a lot of movies like that. Like The Crow is a
Yeah. They didn't know when to stop, right?
Yeah, I didn't know when to stop, but I'm pretty sure also when they released it, they didn't exactly predict that it was going to be that big.
Yeah.
So there's simply just movies that honestly, it's always a 1 in a million shot that for some reason it just really resonates and people just really connect with it.
What's your score for the first one?
For Tremors, it's a favorite. As much
It's surprisingly still enjoyable to this day, right?
this day, just last night, I watched part of. Well, I didn't watch the entire thing, but I revisited my favorite scenes from it. I still, asking me, it's pretty up there. I still give it like a 9 or maybe even a 9.5, only because I feel that if you're a horror enthusiast or a creature feature enthusiast, this definitely is this is essential watching, if you ask me.
Should be part of your canon.
Yeah, it's not all about serious monster killing, gore, and whatnot. There are movies like this. I'm even tempted to say it's a movie for the entire family, as long as you have kids who are older than 5 years old, I guess.
Yeah, probably 10 years old is good enough.
That's good enough.
For my money, I really agree. A 9, a 9.5 for me over 10. I would bet it's actually more enjoyable than some B-roll or B-level Marvel movies. The script is certainly way tighter. There's no hiding the kind of authenticity and the love that the director lavished on this. He knows his genre of movies. He likes the 1950s monster movies. He got a really cool screenwriter who also loved that. And for some reason, he got Reba McEntire and Kevin Bacon. So what's not to love?
Definitely, it's one of those movies that it's not in a bad way, but in a good way. It solidifies the time. So it was released in 1990, and it really does show the elements of some remnants of the 80s, and definitely that edge of the 90s when it came out. So it's reflective of the time. Even though it was set in a mining town and whatever, as a guy my age, it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely a 90s movie. One of those movies that I will associate with that point in time of my life. So yeah,
that's true. I just wish that, because it was a really good, the spirit of it had a really good world building and stuff like that. It had potential. I just wish they had done right by it and made better sequels, because the characters and the dudes who were playing it, they still tried their best, and they were actually still doing their best to play those kinds of characters. It's just that the magic that was in the first one was missing some crucial ingredients to make the lightning in a bottle pop. Please, for the love of God, if you're doing a monster movie about seismic activity and big worms underground, stick to the rolling camera on the ground when you're chasing them. Don't make your monsters two-legged, and don't make them appear above ground.
Yeah, that was just pretty. It was just really sad when those two sequels came out. So yeah. So again, I guess in wrapping up. High score. Definitely watch it if you haven't. Although we're sort of judging you if you haven't watched it yet. And
Not sorta. We are judging you.
Yeah, for the love of God, don't do a remake. This is one of those movies that it's good as it is, and if young people can't relate to it because again it looks like a '90s movies, then you know what it's
Yeah.
they're lost.
Just a quick insert, Joey. I mentioned the graboids were inspired by the original David Lynch of Dune. It's interesting that Denis Villeneuve is remaking Dune with the sandworms again. So maybe we'll see another sequel. They'll probably try to make another sequel of Tremors after they see the success of the November-December release of the new Dune movie. It might happen.
Yeah, it's a scary thought because I don't know. Some remakes rarely work, in my opinion, when we're talking about movies. So, but you know what? We never know. So when it does come out, we're definitely going to be talking about it as well. So yeah, that's another episode of Kill the Lights. Again, the film is called Tremors. You can watch it right now, especially since we're all under quarantine. If you're looking for a film that'll get you excited in just the right amount, something you can watch while you're eating that can of pork and beans and just figuring out what to do next with your day, this is definitely one of those perfect movies for that occasion. Again, this has been Joey D, my co-host Carl, and then again, this has been Kill the Lights. Do check out our other episodes that's uploaded now on Spotify. And again, we'll see you when we watch our next horror film or, interview our next aficionado of everything dark and on the fringe. This has been Kill the Lights. Goodbye.
Bye. Stay safe, guys.
This has been the Kill the Lights podcast. It's produced and recorded at Big Baby Studios. Follow us on Facebook and follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.